All right, I think we're live. Push 1 in the chat if you can hear me. All right, got a confirmation. Thank you for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 823, Geopolitics. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. There's a document in the description beneath the video for you following along with in reference. If you want to join the panel, there is a link in the chat. It's pinned to the top. Make sure you update your Zoom client before joining. And let me get started by sharing my screen. Let me know if you can see my screen. We can get started. All right, got a confirmation for seeing the screen. Let's get started with this. First item on the docket is from Reuters. BRICS welcomes new members and push to reshuffle world order. The BRICS bloc of developing nations agreed on Thursday to admit Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, Argentina, and the United Arab Emirates in a move aimed at accelerating its push to reshuffle a world order it sees as outdated. In deciding in favor of an expansion, the bloc's first in 13 years, BRICS leaders left the door open to future enlargement as dozens more countries voiced interest in joining a group they hope can level the global playing field. The expansion adds economic heft to BRICS, whose current members are China, the world's second largest economy, as well as Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa. It could also amplify its declared ambition to become a champion of the global South. But longstanding tensions could linger between members who want to forge the grouping into a counterweight to the West, notably China, Russia, and now Iran, and those continue to nurture close ties to the United States and Europe. Quote, the membership expansion is historic. Chinese President Xi Jinping, the bloc's most stalwart proponent of enlargement, said. It shows determination of BRICS countries for unity and cooperation within the broader developing countries. Originally an acronym coined by Goldman Sachs chief economist Jim O'Neill in 2001, the bloc was founded as an informal four-nation club in 2009, added South Africa a year later in its only previous expansion. The six new candidates will formally become members on January 1st, 2024. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said when he named the countries during a 3-day leaders summit he is hosting in Johannesburg. BRICS has embarked on a new chapter in its effort to build a world that is fair, a world that is just, a world that is also inclusive and prosperous, Ramaphosa said. We have consensus on the first phase of this expansion process, and other phases will follow. The countries invited to join the individual BRICS members' desires to bring allies into the club. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva had vocally lobbied for neighbor Argentina's inclusion, while Egypt has close commercial ties with Russia and India. The entry of oil powers, Saudi Arabia and UAE, highlights their drift away from the United States orbit and ambitions to become global heavyweights in their own right. Russia and Iran have found common cause in their shared struggle against U.S.-led sanctions and diplomatic isolation, with their economic ties deepening in the wake of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. BRICS is not competing with anyone. Russia, Vladimir Putin, who is attending the summit remotely due to an international warrant for his alleged war crimes, said on Thursday. But it's also obvious that this process of the emerging of a new world order is still has fierce opponents. Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi celebrated his country's BRICS invitation with a swipe at Washington, saying on Iranian television network Al-Alam that the expansion shows that the unilateral approach is on the way to decay. Beijing is close to Ethiopia, and the country's inclusion also speaks to South Africa's desire to amplify Africa's voice in global affairs. United Nations Secretary Antonio Guterres attended Thursday's expansion announcement, reflecting the bloc's growing influence. He echoed BRICS' longstanding calls for reforms of the United Nations Security Council, International Monetary Fund, and World Bank. Today's global governance structures reflect yesterday's world, he said. For multilateral institutions to remain truly universal, they must reform to reflect today's powers in economic realities. BRICS countries have economies that are vastly different in scale, in governments with different, with often divergent foreign policy goals, a complicating factor for the bloc's consensus decision-making model. Though home to about 40% of the world's population and quarter of global gross domestic product, internal divisions have long hobbled BRICS ambitions, becoming a major player on the world stage. Anyways, that's just about the end of it. Here's what I think about the BRICS at this point. They're no longer the BRICS. I don't know what they're going to call it next, but they're no longer the BRICS. What they are right now is a global South club of countries that basically were at one point colonized. Let's take South Africa, being the first African member, completely under apartheid and colonized by the British. When you take China into instance, China, only came onto its feet in 1949, they had many sort of occupations and disruptions in their history by foreign powers.
Your mic.
Your mic is very low.
Oh, it is? Hold on. Yo, what about now? We good?
I can turn my volume up.
Okay.
Okay.
Just a real quick point to what you were saying about China. They didn't succumb to occupation, but they did succumb to subjugation vis-a-vis the Opium Wars, right? Mm-hmm. So they were weakened. They weren't colonized, they were weakened.
Yeah. Well, they were occupied by the British.
Well, that's what I mean. Well, I guess, yeah, because it was the British who did that, right? So I guess
the British, the Japanese, there's a number of countries that have occupied China at one point in time within their history. And so that's really what I'm referring to, is that the commonality of BRICS members.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
No, you got to go ahead. Yeah, I'm saying I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying, like, for the Chinese, for those that don't know, that was during the 19th century.
Yeah.
That was during the 19th century when that happened.
Yeah, India was also occupied by the British. Russia had been invaded twice, once by the French and then also by Germany to their far east. To their far west. Mm-hmm. And then you take Brazil into consideration, Brazil and its ties with Portugal. We see that most of these members at one point in time have been had their histories and their progress disrupted by European powers. And so this is more of a conglomeration of, victims of colonialism, if that's probably a more appropriate term. They're no longer the BRICS. They're no longer the BRICS at this point. And so what I'm saying here is that it's BRICS plus now. That's really what the new acronym is, BRICS plus. But to have 11 members now you're gonna have to call it like I don't know, the dirty dozen or something like that. I don't know what they're gonna call it. They have to come up with a new entire branding, because the whole entire idea of the BRICS was because it was those founding members. But now you say BRICS, well, Saudi Arabia, Iran,
Mexico.
Well, Mexico's not a part of this. Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, Argentina, UAE. Their acronyms don't even fit within the model. And so you have to call it something completely different. But they're not a military bloc, and that's important for people to understand. They're not a military bloc. They are a economic club. And what they're doing.
That's why, Mike, that's why I was throwing Mexico in the mix, because you're right, they're not. They're a business and supply chain bloc.
Yeah, but they're not a part of the BRICS.
No. I'm saying Mexico is not a part of the BRICS in the general sense, right? But what Mexico is doing is diversifying its interests in such a way where what it doesn't want to do is be held to say like one side or the other. So they're opening up a lot of their ports, manufacturing, and all that to the Chinese, right? So I would say that what they're doing is they're not part of BRICS, but they're cooperating. But to your point, though, it's not a military outfit. It's more of a supply chain, technology, and manufacturing outfit.
Yeah, but they're not a part of even the conversation right now. They're completely different, separate from this conversation. I'm saying the BRICS members at this point, let's take Saudi Arabia into consideration. They have a lot of cash. They're sitting on a lot of cash right now because of their energy revenues. Iran has a lot of, catching up to do with some of their economic ambitions because of the sanctions that the United States put on them under Trump. Ethiopia is kind of shaky because they just came out of a civil war about 9 months ago, and so things are still trying to find their pieces to be put back together. And then you take Egypt into consideration. Egypt controls the Suez Canal. They're a strong player in the Mediterranean. And they also have gas too. And so from an African perspective, I think that Cyril Ramaphosa got what he wanted in terms of bringing in more African members. Out of all of those members, 2 of them are actually African. And so I think he's getting what he wants in terms of adding more African voices to the table. And then you take Argentina into instance. Argentina needs a lot of help, primarily because they have a lot of debt in their portfolio, and so Argentina can use all the help it can get. And then you add the UAE. The UAE is a energy superpower in the Middle East because of a lot of the gas that it exports, and a lot as well as the oil. And plus, they're a more forward-thinking country, at least in comparison to maybe Saudi Arabia, because they put a satellite and other things into space as well. And so they're a lot more progressive than, let's say, Saudi Arabia is. That being said, all of these members bring a lot more to the table than what even South Africa was bringing to the table. South Africa had a very modern financial infrastructure compared to the rest of the continent, but at this point, they're really shaky right now. They can't even keep the power on. And so I think that expanding the BRICS is actually a good thing, but I also think that you have to rebrand it. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you think with the South African component, right? Because when you like let's look at like say Argentina, South Africa, these are all sort of like they have which was it like sort of like ports and peninsulas and shit, right? They're kind of right on both sides, sort of like a Florida, for example, right? Like there's 2 sides to the part of the land that comes into the water. Right. See, so I think these are also sort of like strategic areas. Like you were saying, even with South Africa, even with the electrical issues and all that, do you think that's more of a strategic point in terms of the movement of things
I
from
think
where South Africa stands?
I think port-based economies make sense if you have the ability to export things. And
right,
South Africa has a lot of minerals that they export already, and so that's not that much of a change. But when it comes to Argentina is very debt driven. UAE is very much they're in a cash positive position, as well as Saudi Arabia. They're very cash positive right now, and so they don't really have to they're playing a different game. Their whole entire framework is different compared to the rest of the members.
Well, the UAE, those are the guys that, because they're cash positive, they're always the ones that bring all these new city concepts to the table. Masdar City, remember that shit from about 10 years ago? They were supposed to launch that, dude. They got this whole other project that they're talking about trying to launch, where it's just like this whole sort of enclosed city in sort of like this weird confined building type of thing. I mean, they're always ahead of the curve when it comes to that kind of shit, because yeah, you're right. They're flush with cash. They can throw it at the shit in use cases.
Yeah, and so they have to be a little bit more forward thinking because they're in the desert for the most part. So their time is very limited out there. But Ethiopia is another shaky member that's been added. Iran could be a little bit shaky. They live in a bad neighborhood themselves. Could be some future conflicts with Afghanistan and a couple other places. Azerbaijan and Armenia. And so everybody has their own issues that are proprietary to themselves. But the thing here is expanding it makes a lot more sense. I just wonder what they're going to rebrand it as. India had just landed a satellite, a moon lander in their space mission that same week that they were having a BRICS conference. And then you take into consideration, UAE, they do have a space project going on. Saudi Arabia is capable of doing these type of things. They just haven't really added too much to that portfolio. And then Iran, Iran has strategic missile capabilities or rocket capabilities, nuclear energy ambitions. They do have some technological heft in their portfolio. That being said, I'm just saying that all these members bring a lot to the table. They just have to come up with a better framework as to what it is that they're trying to do, how it is that they're going to move forward, and who's going to benefit from it the most. Because all of these members all trade with the United States. And so if they mess up with the United States, the dominoes could, kind of fall one by one, because South Africa is very heavily dependent upon the United States for trade. I think they have about $20 or $25 billion in surplus for trade. And so you take, with the exception of Russia and Iran, they don't really have too much trade with the United States. Ethiopia is heavily dependent upon China as well. It's just, they just need to actually put a framework in place as to what it is that they're trying to do, what kind of objectives are they trying to reach, and who's going to benefit the most. I've always been of the mindset that they have to focus on energy, because if you don't have energy, you can't electrify your industries, you can't do business with anybody. And so South Africa is one of those countries that needs energy.
Isn't that what Russia's interest in Africa is largely?
For nuclear energy, but a lot of people push back against that because they don't really want to end up like Japan, with a nuclear meltdown. Nobody wants to end up like that.
They have that offshore nuclear joint that they were trying to do. It's literally like on a floating barge or some shit. Or what was that?
It's a prototype and a concept, but it's not really anything that's really come to fruition. Now Turkey has deployed a barge with this sort of energy, there's sort of energy capacity on there to help, float their their country's lights, but that's the extent of it. They need something that's permanent and long term, and they don't really have it right now, and so they're still dependent upon coal. I'm of the perspective that they should be focusing heavily on wind and solar.
Solar, thank you.
Right?
I was hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah, wind and solar have to be a part of their energy portfolio as to how they're going to electrify the country, because as it stands right now, half the country's in darkness, primarily because their infrastructure is 100 years old and they don't know what to do with it. And so, well, not that they don't know, it's just there's a lot of effery going on, internally that needs to be resolved first and foremost. And so you need to be able to electrify your industries in order for it to actually do business. And so that's kind of the biggest challenge that they have.
Well, for this article, I don't have anything additional. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't have anything additional on this one. But no, I agree with you, like in terms of like energy diversification, I think having primarily solar, wind, right, in terms of the two alternative methods, and then using diesel generation as backup. Right. And then remember what we talked about just a few days ago, lead acid battery banks. See, so you got two energy generation sources, one backup source, and then you also have your bank source.
Yeah, for any country like South Africa to operate, they would need at least, half a terawatt of power coming online. And that takes a long time to bring that much 500 megawatts is not something that's easy.
You're going to have to combine. You're going to have to combine a few different, you know what I mean? Because California does it. You're going to have to combine a few different energy generation sources to hit that.
Well, that's all dependent on, can you afford to actually bring these, to acquire these resources, and who's going to put it together? Because is it going to be indigenous people on the ground, the Africans on the ground, or are you going to rely on China? Or are you going to rely on Turkey? Who's going to do all of this? That's what I'm saying. Like all of that has to be discussed. And I'm pretty sure they're discussing it behind the scenes, but it's just a matter of putting that framework together.
Go ahead, dude. You got it.
All right. Next item on the docket is from AP News. The African Union is joining the G20, a powerful acknowledgement of a continent of 1 billion people. The group of the world's 20 leading economies is welcoming the African Union as a permanent member, a powerful acknowledgement of Africa as its more than 50 countries seek a more important role on the global stage. U.S. President Joe Biden called last year for the AU's permanent membership in the G20, saying it's been a long time in coming. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcomed the current AU chair, the Comoros President Azali, with a hug on a Saturday at the G20 summit his country is hosting, saying he was elated. Quote, "Congratulations to all of Africa," said Senegal President Macky Sall, the previous AU chair who helped to push for the membership. The AU had advocated for full membership for 7 years, spokesperson Iba Kalando said. Until now, South Africa was the bloc's only G20 member. Here's a look at the AU and what its membership represents in a world where Africa is central to discussions about climate change, food security, migration, and other issues. Permanent G20 membership signals the rise of a continent whose young population of 1.3 billion is set to double by 2050 and make up a quarter of the planet's peoples. The AU's 55 member states, which include the disputed Western Sahara, have pressed for meaningful roles in the global bodies that long represented a now faded post-World War II order, including the United Nations Security Council. They also want reforms to a global financial system, including the World Bank and other entities, that forces African countries to pay more than others to borrow money, deepening their debt. I brought that up earlier.
Yeah, I was going to say, then that was something that just happened, that came up as a topic maybe a couple of weeks ago, right? With the World Bank, right? Yes. And Russia coming in and relieving some debt because of some geopolitical shenanigans, right?
Yeah. Africa is increasingly courting investment and political interest from a new generation of global powers beyond the US and the continent's former European colonizers. China is Africa's largest trading partner and one of its largest lenders. Russia is its leading arms provider. Gulf nations have become some of the continent's biggest investors. Turkey's largest overseas military base and embassy are in Somalia. Israel and Iran are increasing their outreach in search of partners. African leaders have impatiently challenged the framing of the continent as a passive victim of war, extremism, hunger, and disaster that's pressured to take one side or another among global powers. Some would prefer to be brokers, as shown by African peace efforts following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Granting the African Union membership in the G20 is a step that recognizes the continent as a global power in itself. I disagree with that. With full G20 membership, the AU can represent a continent that's home to the world's largest free trade area. It's also enormously rich in the resources the world needs to combat climate change, which Africa contributes to the least, but it's affected by the most. The African continent has 60% of the world's renewable energy assets and more than 30% of the minerals key to renewable and low carbon technologies. Congo alone has almost half of the world's cobalt, a metal essential for lithium-ion batteries, according to the United Nations report on Africa's economic development released last month. African leaders are tired of watching outsiders take the continent's resources for processing and profits elsewhere and want more industrial development closer to home to benefit their economies. Take Africa's natural assets into account, and the continent is immensely wealthy. Kenya President William Ruto said at the first Africa Climate Summit this week, the gathering in Nairobi ended with a call for fairer treatment by financial institutions. The delivery of rich countries long promised $100 billion a year in climate financing for developing nations and a global tax on fossil fuels.
$100 billion?
Yeah, that was promised some time ago.
Damn.
That's nothing compared to what, the U.S. Africa Summit last year was $55 billion. So,
what you were talking about something that was promised a minute ago, and I'm just saying $100 billion.
Well, John Kerry went over there and basically told them to go screw that. They're never going to get that. So, finding a common position among the EU's member states, from the economic powers of Nigeria and Ethiopia to some of the world's poorest nations, can be a challenge. And the AU itself has long been urged by some Africans to be more forceful in its responses to coups and other crises. The body's rotating chairmanship, which changes annually, also gets in the way of consistency, but Africa will need to speak with one voice if it hopes to influence G20 decision-making. Anyways, here's my take on the Africans joining the G20. I say big deal, and here's why. Why do Africans want to be a part of the same club that actually colonized them in the first place? That's the real question. I would have thought that the AU would want to be a permanent member of like the BRICS. That would make a lot more sense. But being a permanent member of the G20, probably not so much, because as it stands right now, G20 really doesn't do anything that's of importance to anyone. It doesn't really have a working mechanism to actually make things function. They don't actually do anything.
You have to be a part of the G7, right?
Neither one of them do anything.
Well, actually, at this point, it's a
country club, right? It's a country club. Everybody's just there to take pictures and whatnot, and photo ops, and it's not really anything functional.
Because what is the G7? What is the G7 really like laying down, right? What sort of global measures are they really kind of put down? Because it seems. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's just people convening, but it's not really anything of substance. You know, they're
Yeah,
not really doing anything. It's not like,
yeah,
oh, we met last year and we set a goal for 2023 that we were going to do this, this, and this, and we hit on all of
yeah. We hit
these key
these
points.
climate points or these these industrial points or these technology points. Like you don't
Mhm.
really hear anything coming up out of the G. Well, like you said, the G20. That's just basically I don't know, a pageantry gift or something. But see, even when you take it to the G7, it's just sort of like, okay, what the fuck are even they doing?
Well, G7 was the G8 until they kicked Russia out.
Well,
But I'm saying
right,
what I'm saying here is that those are supposed to be like the biggest players, of the
right,
184 countries, and then you take the G20, which is supposed to be the leading economies of the 90s. That's really when it was
mm-hmm.
created, right? And so
Right.
at the time, South Africa was a emerging economy that was supposed to be a big player, and then they went through their 2008 crisis and haven't been relevant since. And thus the
Yep.
BRICS came. The BRICS add South Africa to its portfolio or to its membership, and now you have the BRICS, right? And so G20 doesn't really have a whole lot of teeth as it's supposed to, and as it, I guess at one point it did. That being said,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the African Union joining the G20 as significant. It's not really significant at all. There's nothing really good coming out of the G20. And plus, why would you call it the G20 if you add 55 new members? What the hell do you call it? That's what I'm saying. Like, there's a branding crisis that's going on in geopolitics where we're adding all of these members and still calling it the same thing. Well, if you call it the G20 and then you add the AU as a permanent member, but what's their representation within the AU? Even from a branding
Right,
standpoint, there's nothing significant there.
because there's how many nations that are part of the AU again?
55.
Right. So are they just one block?
No, well, what does it become now? The G72? Or
Really,
what?
that's what I was really just about to ask you. Is it one block or does it become like the G75 or some shit?
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's just there's too much grandstanding amongst these meeting bodies and whatnot, and it doesn't really add anything significant to the conversation at all. Africans need a lot more tangibles on the table than the rest of the members of the G20 already have. And so most of the members in the G20 are already developed nations.
Right.
The AU is not a 100% developed body at all, with the exception of maybe Egypt, maybe Algeria, maybe what do you call it? Morocco. Those members are kind of already stable in what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
But
But
when you
even
have
when I was going to say when Morocco, they just got hit by that goddamn earthquake. So, they got, but
they have they've
right,
modernized the country, right?
infrastructure.
They have mass transit, they have, infrastructure, financial systems in place. They have, the ability to actually be self-sufficient. Most of the other African countries don't have that. And
No,
so
they were hosting even like touring car races in Marrakesh.
yeah.
Because they had it. That's how modern it is there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, next item on the docket is from CARICOM. CARICOM African leaders identify areas of cooperation at historic first summit. Oh, sorry, this is the wrong article. I don't even know how this got up there.
What?
This is the wrong one.
Hey, Mike, there was one other thing that you were literally, shit, I wanted to ask you about it. It was a point you were just making.
Okay.
And it had to do with the AU. Oh, okay. Do you think Agenda 2030, because if you dig in the archives, we did a live stream on it, right? Agenda 2030 with regards to the AU, right? And we went through the actual document. We pulled up the PDF and went through the document. Do you think that also is a factor that plays in all this? Given that they have the whole Cardano thing, they kind of have some infrastructure in terms of the AU and that whole Agenda 2030 thing. Do you think that has a part to play? Just out of curiosity.
Part to play in what?
No, I'm saying, does it have a part to play in terms of, like, let's just say, there may be, say, hesitancy to join the G20, given what their objectives are to try to roll out by 2030, because they may see themselves as a bloc that's bigger than that.
It's hard to say because the AU, they're not really they're not 100% on the same page with each other either, because they have different sort of factions like ECOWAS, you have East African Economic Community, and then you have SADC, which is South African, the Southern African Development Community. They're not all 100% on the same page either.
Right. That's why I wanted to ask you this. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I don't see what the, what are they getting out of all of this? I don't know. I guess it's this representation. It's more like a DEI conference, if anything else. They don't really actually do anything, but they, everything is just more, window dressing.
Okay.
Yeah.
While you pull up the next article, let me dig up that link to that live stream. I'll post it if you want to check it out. What I'm talking about in terms of the Agenda 2030.
Yeah, I don't know how I just lost this article. This is interesting.
Wait, what happened?
Yeah, I had an article that, I thought I had it, I thought I added to the docket and I kind of lost it. Not sure what just happened.
Oh.
All right, just give me a second. I'll come back to that.
You got it. Go ahead, man. Yeah, I just found the video. Okay, this is what it was. Episode 717. I'm gonna drop it. The Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa 2030. That's what it was.
All right, let me share my screen.
Okay.
I'll come back to that article later.
All right.
All right, this is from Plenages. G77 summit, Barbados calls for science to be an empowerment tool. So there was a recent summit this week. Barbadian Prime Minister Mia Mottley also urged for clamping down on technological gaps that prevent poor nations from accessing resources necessary for the well-being and progress of their peoples. Quote, most of the world's population is waking up to the reality that our future cannot remain in the shadow of an order that the last century multilateral institutions vowed as a past feature and not as the ruin of modern existence, Motley added. Prime Minister Motley also regretted that what has been seen over the years really reinforces the strengthening of power and wealth in the hands of the few, and how that such concentration is likely to be further exaggerated by the continued privatization of knowledge. As unfair as that scenario is, it is further reflected in the absence of a just industrial strategy for the global South. It is reflected in the apartheid of vaccines, despite clear moral imperative that exists for all of us as human beings to save as many lives as possible, especially in times of danger, she condemned. Motley pointed out the world is presently experiencing an unprecedented crisis just when humanity has great scientific progress at its disposal, and noted how commitments to protect the whole planet become empty promises, whether the less industrialized countries do not have the means to put them into practice or lack access to monetary resources. The absence of political space to allow us to pursue progress as expressed in the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, unequal access to financing, whether from international institutions or private capital markets, which continue to charge a premium to those who borrow in the South, hamper our capacity to provide opportunities for our people to own and control technology, she stressed. According to her, Cuba has been a beacon for the global South thanks to its scientific and technological breakthroughs, despite a hostile and unjust blockade and terrorism faced for over 60 years. The G77 plus China Summit is being held from Friday to Saturday at the Havana International Conference Center. Under the issue, the current challenges of development, the role of science, technology, and innovation. So that's what this G77 is focusing on.
I'm about to say, so it is called the G77 now.
No, it's always been called the G77.
Well, that would be like all the other.
That's the global South.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure the math wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always been a global South representation within the United Nations. That's what the G77 stands for. But
hey, there was a point that I wanted to touch on about the mention of Cuba. I think, did you either send me an article or did we cover this? Electric vehicles being manufactured in Cuba?
Yeah, we talked about that last year.
There we go. So I think that's where we kind of are looking at that mention of Cuba and its technological advancements and their capabilities and what they're able to do. For those of y'all that don't know, I'm not sure if you know about this, but the Chinese have set up shop and you got electric vehicles and components and stuff like that being produced in Cuba in partnership. Well, not necessarily, it's not the Chinese set up shop, but Cuba has the technological expertise and it is an outpost, so to speak.
Well, the thing here is Cuba has always been reverse engineering, systems and whatnot in order to accommodate them, to further accommodate themselves, right? And so like all those old Chevy Bel Airs and
that's a good point.
Cadillacs and stuff that were caught in the time warp in the 1960s or the 1950s.
They've kept all those cars going.
Yeah, because what they did is they took all of those leaded engines out and then they added fuel injected engines out of old Mercedes and Ladas and stuff like that from the Soviet Union. And so that's how they're able to keep them going. They work just fine as long as, as long as there's
maintenance and shit.
Yeah, as long as there's unleaded gas coming in, unleaded fuel available, they'll be able to keep the cars going. It's not that difficult. It's like anything else. I didn't know they were engine swapping. I didn't know that. Oh, they've been doing that for the last 30 plus years. Since the Soviet Union, they've been doing that. And so you see so when you see these videos, you see them riding around in these old 1950s cars. Yeah. Those cars have been largely modernized on the internals, not necessarily on the external.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So keep in mind, I'm saying if you push people into a corner, they'll figure it out for themselves at some point.
Yeah, true
right.
Indeed.
And so when you say, that the Cubans are actually developing these electric, these EVs, that's not that far of a, it's not that far fetched for them to be doing that because
it makes sense now. Because I didn't know that they was doing like swapping like old carbureted motors for like completely EFI based, electronic fuel injection systems and shit. I had no idea, right? Because then the next logical transition from there is hybrid and electric.
Well, yeah, electric, smaller vehicles, but they're never gonna have like super large, high speed rail systems and stuff like that because they just don't have the capacity for that. Right now.
They're doing what per that article in the docket that we did a few days ago, or maybe like a week ago. Like that's why now it makes a whole lot of sense, because I had no idea that they were in the business of doing that shit. That's why they keep those cars looking pristine, man.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's nothing else to do, right? I mean, you can't. Not everybody can get online, right? And you kind of
yeah. Damn.
All right, let me share my screen real quick. I don't understand how I lost that article. Let me know when you can see my screen.
We're all good, bro. That's it.
All right, this is from the Jamaican Observer, Unity Across Continents and Oceans. Former Jamaican Prime Minister P.J. Patterson's address to the Africa-CARICOM Day forum held September 7, 2023 at the council room in UWI regional headquarters. The ethnic origins and commonality of our colonial experience are beyond dispute. For Black people everywhere, the lyrics of the Honorable Peter Tosh reveal what is apodic. No mind your nationality, you have the identity of an African. It is in recognition of this irrefutable reality that the African Union declared the existence of 6 regions. Despite the close and productive collaboration between the continent and the Caribbean and United Nations, the Commonwealth, the non-aligned and other multilateral fora, there never was a meeting of heads of state and government for the 5 regions on the continent within the 14 nations of CARICOM until Tuesday, September 7th, 2021. Among the Solomon decisions they took was to designate September 7th of every year as Africa-CARICOM Day. The Patterson Institute for Africa-CARICOM Advocacy regards September 7th as one of tremendous significance and is proud to join with the University of West Indies, its Office of Global Affairs, and the Center of Reparation Research on this special occasion to unite in recognizing our shared history, culture, and aspirations. We are honored by the participation of those who join with us to deepen the longstanding and deep-rooted connections across the oceans and examine the prospects for building strong and enduring institutional relationships, in promoting fruitful partnerships and increasing cultural bonds between kith and kin. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, our leaders were unable to savor the fine traditional hospitality of Kenya as the first host. Not surprisingly, when they met virtually, it was the lessons from the impact and response to the pandemic which drew their immediate attention. It was crystal clear the developed countries indulgent in vaccine hoarding and vaccine nationalism had denied early access to the majority of our countries, which we were only rescued by sharing among ourselves whatever vaccines we eventually obtain. To avert this, our heads instantly concluded there can be only one solution. We must manufacture all the vaccines we need on the African continent and within the Caribbean ourselves. We must engage in the sharing of knowledge and capacity building to provide the technology and medical supplies for our own health requirements. As we commemorate this Memorial Day, September 7th, there is gathered in Nairobi a summit of African heads to discuss the existential threat of climate change, which exposes so many of our Caribbean islands to extinction. Faced with rising sea levels, frequent and devastating hurricanes and earthquakes, volcanoes, droughts, floods, the 14 countries of the community and 54 nations of Africa must unite to resist any lowering of the 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels as the Paris Accord provides, and insist that the polluters pay in full for the destruction that they have caused to our natural environments and fragile ecosystems. Simultaneously, Africa and the Caribbean must mobilize their scientific expertise and adequate resources on climate change mitigation, adaptation strategies, and initiatives to safeguard our national environment and promote resilience. The present configuration of global power reflected in the wars and conflicts which intensify geopolitical rivalry, when combined, demonstrate the imperative for Africa and the Caribbean to find their own solutions to overcome ages of enslavement and imperial exploitation, to forge sustainable development and self-reliance. The younger generation will never accept that poverty and hunger must forever be our lot. The conflict in Ukraine has heightened the issue of food security. It threatens a shortage of the essential ingredients for food supplies, particularly on the African continent. In sub-Saharan Africa, more than 1 in 5 persons suffer hunger and starvation. With 60% of the world's arable lands, Africa is importing more than 60% of its food and agricultural inputs. Within the Caribbean, we are still importing too much of the food we consume. It will become even more as the tourism sector expands unless we can produce more food for its consumption. Food security deserves, therefore, the highest priority attention. Hence, we note that with satisfaction the establishment of Exim Bank's Caribbean headquarters in Barbados and applaud the announcement of its president to place a heavy emphasis on developing food security in its leading and credit faculty programs.
Hey, Mike, just a quick question. Can you just explain for those listening in, for those who don't know what CARICOM is, can you just explain that just briefly?
CARICOM is the short for Caribbean communities. It's made up of the 15 countries in the Caribbean that had pretty much aligned themselves. I think Haiti was the last member to be added, I think in 2004. I could be mistaken. D.E. Raptor could probably fill in a little bit more as he's more experienced.
I didn't know D. Yeah, I didn't know D was up here. Hey, what's going on, D?
Yeah, I'm hoping that my microphone is working.
It's good.
You sound perfect, brother. Hey, man, good hearing you, man. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm using my phone because my headset wasn't working properly. Yeah, CARICOM is a community extends from Guyana in the south throughout the Caribbean. I think it's set for Puerto Rico, but
Cuba as well.
Most of the countries in there are English-speaking countries.
Mm-hmm.
The French countries, except for Haiti, kind of like were pressured to kind of keep a low profile. But CARICOM has also become part of the South American, Central America community also.
Yep. We know so well.
At present, the Barbados Prime Minister is the head of, like the chairmanship goes around from country to country, and I think Mia Motley right now is the chairman of the CARICOM community. She's speaker.
I thought the head of Dominica was the head right now. I think that's supposed to change in January too. I could be wrong on that. Let me finish. Let me finish this, DE, and then we'll circle back around to that.
Yo, Mike, you there?
Yep. We know so well that when the political will and intellectual synergies of Africa, the Caribbean, and the diaspora are combined as one and indivisible, we become invincible in the fight, more so because our cause is just. That was responsible for our triumph and as developing countries in negotiating with the European Common Market to create the Lomé Convention. That was the case when we stood firmly with the frontline states for the liberation of Zimbabwe and Namibia. We proceeded to be the vanguard of dismantling the evil system of apartheid. Our leaders, having pledged their allegiance to an African-Caribbean alliance for reparative justice, the Institute, therefore, today supports the growing and inescapable demand that the topic of reparations be placed on the agenda of the forthcoming CHOSM conference in Samoa next year. We must be relentless and boisterous in our claim, no matter how uncomfortable those countries who engage in the most heinous crime against humanity may feel. Pivotal to commencing the process of institutionalizing the partnership of African and Caribbean states, which are heads ordered, is the memorandum of understanding between the two secretariats in order to facilitate the subsequent adoption of the governance constitutive statutes by head. While the original deadline for its signing has passed, we are pleased to note the MOU is now ready and use this form to appeal today for an immediate conclusion as and signatures by the AU and CARICOM. So what's happening here is that the African Union and CARICOM are trying to build a political, cultural, and economic alliance as we speak. And they've been working on this for quite some time. So what does this mean to Black people in America? This means that Black people, this means that Black people have to get themselves together in order to be a part of this conversation, because if you want a seat at the table, you actually have to bring something to the table before you can actually get to that point. And as it stands right now, we don't really have a whole lot of Black people in America who's really about anything globally to really have that conversation. If you listen to the Black manosphere, you would be sorely mistaken if you think that they're going to be a part of a conversation like this that you see on screen. Just not going to happen.
Exactly.
And so it's incumbent upon us that if we want to be a part of these more global conversations like the BRICS, like the Africa-CARICOM conference.
AU, the AU.
Well, that's what this is. Yeah, AU and CARICOM working together, right? And then you start talking about the BRICS, and then you start talking about what's going on in Brazil, because that's the largest population of African descendants of slaves, not what you see in America. That's not the case. You'd be sorely mistaken. Over 56% of Brazil is made up of melanated people who are descendants of slaves, to the tune of 100 million people, to that number. And so there's a lot of moving pieces here that's going on, and a lot of people come and listen to us, and they may listen to other content creators, but they don't understand that Black folks are being left behind in America because everybody else is organizing. You're not organizing. You might organize because you saw, a meme of a brick to the face of a woman, or, you might organize because somebody took, some photos with an OnlyFans person in the manosphere. No, that's not significant, okay? That's not tangible.
It really isn't.
We're talking about people coming to the table and bringing something to the table. Now, that's not to say that it can't happen. It's just the fact that if we use the manosphere as a barometer, you're never going to be able to get to that point.
Well, Mike, there's nothing in the space outside of what it is that we do here that reflects any sort of thoughts or objectives with regards to anything that we could actually take to a CARICOM, for example, right? And so that's literally the barometer at which we have to gauge this on. And I want D to kind of speak more to the character. He knows it more better than I do, right? But I could say that, right? Because we know what the objectives are. I posted the link to the technological advancement agenda of Africa 2030, right? And so in that live stream right there, it references the AU and CARICOM. Once again, Mike asked. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
But we come from a tradition, right? Rael was kind enough to go over the history of Booker T. Washington.
Okay, dude.
Right?
Holy
so
shit.
we know that when it's time to actually organize, the ancestors had already done all of this.
It's done.
Right?
Oh,
They've already
Thank
established
you,
all of this, right?
Thank you.
The Black Chamber of Commerce. Go ahead, D. Raptor. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say this thing started way back in, I would say, the 1900s, because we got to remember that the African Union, remember the meeting they had in London, I think it was 1937, 32 or something like that, where Eric Williams and a group of other Caribbean men met people from America and Africa.
Oh, you're talking about 1945, yep.
And they decided, you know what, we gotta come together as that, not only diaspora and not only Africa, but diasporas, period, as Africans, including everyone, people from the Caribbean, people from South America, Central America, and North America, Canada, England, France, Germany, wherever Black people are, they gotta come together. But the problem is that there's this I don't know, ingrown is division here in America that whatever comes up, there's somebody to fight against it. What I say here in America, I mean, there are people who are ready to join together, join hands with the African Union or people from Brazil. But there's also this group of people who see it as a threat to their hegemony. And they will go to any lengths to kind of put an end to it, because they it's like, take for instance, Marcus Garvey, right? When he started spreading his message, there were people who worked against him to get him overthrown. Malcolm X is another brother. When he started seeing the world, not just America, he was teaching people in America, hey, we got to stand up. But when he started traveling and seeing the condition of the rest of the world, he said, oh my goodness, now we have the same problem everywhere.
Yep.
We had the same problem everywhere.
And that's what led,
we got to bring it all together.
Yeah, and that's what led Malcolm and John Henrik Clark to establish the AAU, which is the Afro-American Union.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. A lot of people don't know Malcolm X was a Pan-Africanist. Make no mistakes about that. He was a Pan-Africanist. John Henrik Clark, a Pan-Africanist. Black Panthers, they were very globalized in their approach to liberation when they started establishing operations in Africa. And so this idea that, to your point, DE, this idea that it can't be done, it can be done, just not with the constituents of the manosphere. That's all I'm saying. That, when you really break it all down, to your point about Marcus Garvey also communicated with who? Booker T. Washington.
Exactly.
Okay, so this all comes back full circle, but if you all have not watched Rael's Booker T. Washington series, make sure you go back to the archives and look at that. So,
yeah, it touches on all that in detail.
All right, let me jump to the
and Mike, I was just going to say, I posted a link in the group chat in the back. So, like when we're finished with all these, I do want to bring up something to kind of support. I post that link supports what DE was saying. So let's just table that after we're done.
Yeah. All right. Last time on the docket is from Al Jazeera. Mali, Niger, in Burkina Faso established Sahel Security Alliance. The Sahel nations signed pact that will allow them to cooperate against threats of armed rebellion or external aggression. So Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have signed a mutual defense pact as the three Sahel countries aim to help each other against possible threats of armed rebellion or external aggression. The charter, known as the Alliance of Sahel States, signed on Saturday, binds the signatories to assist one another, including militarily, in the event of an attack on any one of them. Quote, any attack on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of one or more contracted parties will be considered an aggression against the other parties, it says. It also binds the three countries to work to prevent or settle armed rebellions. Quote, I have today signed with the heads of state of Burkina Faso and Niger the Liptako-Goma Charter establishing the Alliance of Sahel States, with the aim of establishing a collective defense and mutual assistance framework. Mali military leader Assimi Gota said on his X social media account. Interestingly enough, he has a social media account and no one seems to be banning that though. The Liptako-Goma region, where the Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger borders meet, has been ravaged by armed rebellion in recent years. Quote, this alliance will be a combination of military and economic efforts between the three countries. Mali's defense minister Diop told journalists in Bamako, the capital of Mali. Our priority is the fight against terrorism in the three countries. An armed rebellion that erupted in northern Mali in 2012 spread to Niger and Burkina Faso in 2015. All three states were members of the France-supported G5 Sahel Alliance joint force with Chad and Mauritania, launched in 2017 to tackle armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIL groups. They have undergone coups since 2020, most recently Niger, where soldiers in July overthrew President Mohamed Bazoum, who cooperated with the West in the fight against Sahel-based armed groups. The West African regional bloc, ECOWAS, has threatened to intervene militarily in Niger over the coup, but the regional bloc has toned down its war rhetoric in recent weeks. Mali and Burkina Faso quickly responded by saying that any such operation would be deemed a declaration of war against them. Relations between France and the three states have soured since the coup. France has been forced to withdraw its troops from Mali and Burkina Faso and is in a tense standoff with military that seized power in Niger. Mali has also asked the United Nations peacekeeping mission MINUSMA to leave the country. Niger's military rulers have asked France to withdraw its troops and its ambassador, as France has refused to recognize the military authority. Meanwhile, Mali has seen a resumption of hostilities by predominantly Tuareg armed groups over the past week, threatening a 2015 peace agreement. So here's the deal. These are not necessarily coups. I know they call it a coup in the article, but they're not necessarily coups. And here's why. A coup is against democratic, established leadership. In these countries, there's no real democracy at all because people are, eating, foot to mouth, in that regard. And so people were very dissatisfied with all of the French, Francophone states as it stands. And so for them, they don't see it as a coup. They see it as justice, taking out some of these compromised leaders or was purported to be leaders. And so I don't like the language of calling it a coup. I like to call it, land back, I know some people use that term in the social justice community, land back, taking land back, but in reality, people are actually just taking their country back from, these propped up dictators and Jezebels who sleep with, the Europeans, in order to maintain France's footprint inside the Sahel. That being said, these people are doing exactly what Black people should be doing in America. Getting rid of some of these conservative leaders who rob them every single day of their social being and finances, all over the country. But this was bound to happen at some point if the United States is training your military. Because coincidentally, when France wanted to work with Australia on these submarines, they were subtly dislodged by the United States and the UK to create AUKUS that essentially kicked the France out of, Southeast Asia, for that matter. And so where does that leave France? France was running around trying to find new friends. But what they forgot was that in the Sahel, the United States was training all of these military folks who eventually took that military training and started taking out all of these French-backed leaders. And so now France is being quietly squeezed out of Africa. I can't imagine that this is going to be good for France. I mean, what are you going to do with all your resources?
Did you say quietly?
Yeah, well, one by one, different states were kind of pushing them out. And so I think this is payback for what happened in Libya. I think that Sarkozy made a fatal mistake taking out Gaddafi. And that led to a lot of this. This wouldn't be happening if Gaddafi was still in power, because he would keep the region stable.
And Mike, I just want to mention here, I don't know if you guys know about this, that happened this past week. There was a huge flood that took place in Libya. And they're saying
dam broke.
Yeah, they're saying that it took out like literally 20,000 people, like a whole entire town literally just got washed away, dude. It's like, Mike, hey, bro, props to you for doing the Geopolitics joint today, because we haven't kind of done one of these in a minute, but there are things that go on in the world, like outside of the goings on of the manosphere, right? I think there's more significant international incidents outside of a Somali chick getting hit with a brick, supposedly, allegedly. Can't verify that. But, when you mention Morocco, there was an earthquake. When you mention Libya, there was a flood. When you mention the French getting squeezed out, these things have to kind of be put on the table so that we have a full sort of global scope of what the fuck it is that's going on, and how things might be moving and changing.
Well, look, one of the things that happened is, I don't know if you know a lot about the history of the planet itself, not just the area of West Africa, but Central America. They have a rulership similar to the Roman Empire there. South America had the same thing. We had the 5 nations of North America. And when the Caucasians came over from Europe, those 5 nations, they got wiped out. Mm-hmm. The same thing is happening throughout the world right now. There's a upheaval going on everywhere. Not only the economic upheaval, we see this war with the US and China and Russia, Iran, and everybody involved in, but the whole atmosphere of the planet is changing. What we're seeing in Africa is only a result of that. The French started messing up, like Mike said, when they took out Gaddafi, but it was before that. But lately, in the last couple of years, the guy who is the president of France right now, he's been murmuring, going around pushing against the US and the war in Ukraine. He's been under kind of, because of what the US did with the submarine thing, partially. He's been going around kind of like poking the US, because of the war in the Ukraine. And the last thing he said is, the who needs friends. I don't know if you read or who needs friends when they got people like the US, you know? But France itself, they have been doing so many bad things in this area. Right now I'm in Gambia, right? I've been to I've been to Senegal. I've never been to Burkina Faso or Niger. But can you imagine a place where 60, 70% of the people have no power? No power. You don't have a light in your house after sundown, you know.
Mhm.
But you are selling your uranium to France for 80 cents a ton. You understand that?
Yeah.
Wait, I'm
France,
sorry. I'm
France
sorry.
is
Did you wait?
making
DE, did you say 80 cents a ton?
Yeah, 80
the
American
the
cents.
world going
What?
rate is $200.
Holy
The
shit.
world going rate.
Mhm.
It goes up and down, but the world's going rate is $200, man. And these guys are selling it to France for 80 cents. The guy who in Nigeria, the guy who was the head of supposedly democratically elected, the guy who was president before him was at a meeting in France. And the French president looked at him and says, "You guys in Africa cannot run your country. You need people like us to do it for you." And the guy walked off the stage. And he said, and the French government insulted him again and said, "Hey, he's probably going to fix the air conditioner." When that guy got back to Niger, the people kicked him out. That's how this president became the president of Niger now. And he came in and followed his footsteps of his predecessor, keeping France in there.
Yeah.
The people who took over power from him got rid of the French. And it's not only Niger, Burkina Faso did the same thing. They were like setting the tone for Niger to go ahead and do it. That's
Yep.
why you see all three countries have now gone together and say, you know what, ECOWAS, the hell with you. We're not going to, you can attack us, but we're going to fight you. And I can't understand how ECOWAS can fight anybody because Nigeria, look, northern Nigeria has gold, has not only gold, there are kids 10, 8 years old working in the field, digging up gold, copper, any kind of metal that they can find, lithium. They get 20 cents a day for doing this. And Nigeria wants to go and fight a war against Burkina Faso, and people in northern Nigeria say, nope, you can't do that. Those are our brothers. You're not fighting, because the people in northern Nigeria, right across the board, even the president, the current president, his father, his grandfather, I think is, or his father, is from Niger. And you got Ghana, who is part of ECOWAS. They are borrowing money because they defaulted a couple of years ago on their loan to the IMF. They just borrowed $3 billion. Well, I made a video that says, hey, when the 3 years is up and they're ready to repay it, they're going to have to borrow $6 billion to repay it because they can't afford to make the payments on the money that they're borrowing. That's what happened the last time. And now they are pushing for the war. Then you have Senegal, who the French are encouraging him to change the constitution so he can get another term to continue the French domination in this area. So you see this French people, and America now has a base in Niger. They have a drone base. This is a serious conflict. It's very low key, and only the few people who know about it in Africa. But it's a low key conflict between the US and France.
Yeah.
And France is going to lose because the French don't have the money to take care of their own army. If they don't have the funds coming out of West Africa and Central, almost a third of Africa
is owned by France.
Yep.
When you look at a map of French territory, I almost cried when I saw it.
14
all the way
states.
from Congo all the way to the North Africa. It's owned by France. You may as well say owned, because everyone of the president run the country in the name of the French president and the French industry. About 6 months ago, when not breaking up, oh shoot, I forgot the name. Kicked the French out.
Me, Mali.
The French destroyed Mali, exactly. Yes, the French destroyed all the equipment in the mines. I don't know if you guys saw it, but they destroyed all the equipment, so the Malians cannot use the equipment. And Mali turned around and gave the Chinese a contract to do it, because China just said the other day, we gotta give our African brothers the ability to build themselves. So this is a real major conflict. It is not, people are dying. Don't get me wrong, people are dying, but it is not a full-fledged war like what you see in Ukraine or what you saw in Syria. But it's getting there. If these people, these so-called democratically elected presidents are supposed to take care of their people. And one of the people that they don't take care of is their military. Across West Africa, you in the army, and most of these guys, sometimes I'm driving on the road here in Gambia, and I have to pick up soldiers because they don't even have a bicycle to ride home.
Crazy.
When to go home from the barracks.
Crazy.
Wait,
So
D,
you
are you
understand
serious?
why these guys
are you serious? Are you serious?
Yeah, that's a real thing.
The fuck?
Yeah, that's a real thing.
Government workers, except you're on the top level, they be thumbing rides to and from work every day. We don't have any roads. I mean, the rainy season, you used to see our roads, they're 2 feet deep in water.
Yep.
And this is all across West Africa.
Yep. Half-baked infrastructure, not completed. I've talked about this many times the last few years that,
So what Mike said just now about these are not coup d'etats at all.
Yeah.
These are the people themselves now. When the army is supposed to protect the country. It's like when I was in the military, I swore allegiance to not to the United States government, but to protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yep.
You take that and just look at that carefully. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic, means that if the politicians mess up, if they go against what that Constitution says, I have to act. And here these people don't want the military to act in a country that's theirs when they see their own family starving, being murdered by the politicians. And I don't know if you see the suitcases full of money that they confiscated in Gabon.
Yeah. Billions of dollars.
I mean, imagine what that money could have done for getting power to Gabon, getting roads built.
But see, that money is not for building infrastructure. That money is to keep him quiet.
Exactly.
I'm about to say that's hush money, right?
Yeah.
And billions of, billions, man. So
he's not the only one. He's not the only one, DE. There's other leaders sitting on a lot of cash too.
Oh, yes.
But see, nobody wants to actually, understand those nuances that go on. It's not that, you know, when people come on here and they say, oh, you know, Africans only have 3% reading level, or, you know, they're not even having electricity in some places. There's a lot of moving pieces as to why that is the case. You have to take into consideration technology exports controls that are in place that prevent Africans from acquiring the technology that's possible. That's what Mia Motley was saying at the Africa-CARICOM summit, that the hoarding of vaccines, the hoarding of distribution of different sort of technologies, that was the whole purpose of the G77 conference, so that they can have that conversation. But people don't really understand all these nuances like you and I are actually discussing right now, that these are not coup d'etats. You know, in the United States, they call it a coup d'etat, but interestingly enough, they don't call January 6th a coup d'etat. They just call it an insurrection, right? So they're funny with how they use terms in words, but when it comes to foreign nations, they always seem to talk about coups, but never want to talk about a coup that happened on January 6, 2021. You know, so we have to, you know, break all of this stuff down and kind of synthesize it so that people can understand that what's happening there is happening everywhere. You know, if you take into consideration what happened in Alabama last month, Black folks, you know, using that chair, you know, the chair is symbolic to an insurrection too, or a coup d'etat for that matter, right? And so folks are pushing back against, you know, these colonial ideas and colonialism as a framework. They're just getting sick and tired of being pushed around by European folk.
Exactly. I mean, the African continent, I don't know if you have other YouTubers or connections in Africa, but this whole thing, they're pushing back. People in Africa now are seriously pushing back against their leaders. You have leaders that are getting scared now that the military is going to take them out. Because the average person on the street cannot do it without the military, because these leaders didn't train their militaries to fight a war to defend their countries. That's why you see so many soldiers died the other day in Niger, when the people that French trained, you know, they call them Al-Qaeda or whatever it is, when they attacked them. And then these people are not able to go against the soldiers. So the soldiers, their own families are suffering. So it's up to them to do something about it. And if they can persuade each other to do something, then you will have what we have been seeing, these people who are taking control of the government, making changes. Because what happens is this so-called democracy, they can easily, when it comes to staying in power, they change the laws from day to day. Mm-hmm. But when it comes time to change the laws and say, look, we got to build roads, you know, we have to
electrify.
Yeah, exactly. When we have to do these things, it takes years. You know, look, this. I made a video, I don't know, a year or so about Africa-63. This plan that they're going to
2063
bring together Africa. I told people, this is too long now. We got to look at this as realistically, because after this, they're trying to push to end this war now that they're fighting in Ukraine. You know why? Because they want to come back to Africa. And they want to come back to Africa.
And Putin said Africa is of the utmost priority for Russia. Said this recently. Yes,
because he knows that they want to turn away from, he wants to end the war too, because he don't want his people being killed. Anyway, China also wants this war, the war to end, but they want a Africa that's coming into prosperity, so that the people trade. China is involved in trade. They want to do trade. They don't want this If you have a country like I'm saying a country because I would like to see Africa as a nation, a whole nation of people. But if you have a nation of people like America, where pretty much people can afford to buy most of what they want, whether it be food or if they want to go buy a watch or a Jordan sneaker, the majority can do that. It's 75%. In Africa, you can't do that. There's this huge used clothing market. They call it dead man's clothing. The Europeans make a joke about it, calling it dead men's clothing. That has killed any kind of production of clothing in Africa.
Yep.
If you don't have a good economy, if you only export raw materials, you're going to stay poor.
Yep.
If you, China is coming in and building the infrastructure. These European, the EU want to keep that infrastructure out. They're coming in making promises that they don't fulfill.
Because their whole entire existence is predicated on the disenfranchisement of African people, much like white people in the United States. Whole entire identity is predicated on the disenfranchisement of Black people, especially Black men. So you keep them out of the jobs, you keep them out of the competition, you keep them undereducated. All of these things are necessary for them to function as an entity. And so we see this is a global strategy. This isn't something that's kind of individual and kind of, narrowed down to just, a few Francophone states. No, this is a global strategy. And so we have to be the ones to push back against this sort of stuff because, as Africans in the Caribbean are coming together on, Africa-CARICOM Day and, moving pieces in Africa with Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger and soon to be Congo, Brazzaville. So all of these pieces are moving. And the question is, in which direction is it going to tilt? Because Burkina Faso has extended its reach to North Korea and said, we want to make an alliance with them. Okay, they're now bringing in North Koreans. The Russians are already there in Central Africa, in the Central African Republic. And so what does that mean for, Black Americans? Where are they going to be in all of this? I think that you're probably going to see some fireworks go off in 2024 with this next election
One of the
cycle.
things
Go ahead, Dee.
Is DE there?
He's in and out. He's in Gambia right now, so he's kind of on a shaky connection. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm almost back at the house, man. Give me a second.
Yep. And so that's where we are right now. We'll spend another 5 minutes on this and we'll close out. That's where we are right now. All of this is not, out of the norm. I mean, out of the, all of this is in perfect timing. Go ahead, DE. You're going to say something.
Yeah. One of the things that you see, and I don't know if a lot of our brothers look at the way the world really works. When they reach at age 25, between the age 25 and age about 45, 50, that's when men change their environment.
Yep.
And what we have here in Africa is not all, but I would say 70 to 80% of that age group is displaced. If they are wandering around the country doing nothing, they're unemployed or they're doing some kind of labor that is not being paid. They're not being paid. They're not educated. You will see like a couple of weeks ago, I saw that there's this island off the coast of Italy that in the last week they put between 6,000 and 10,000 African men and women in that age group on that island because they don't want to bring into Europe. Europe is now importing people from South America, right?
Mm-hmm.
These African men are, for all intents and purposes, going into slavery in Europe. And they are paying for they're selling whatever land they have in Africa. Their parents or family members are selling whatever land they have and trying to escape to Europe because they think they can go there, make enough money to come back and save their family. But they can't. They're just going into slavery there.
Yep.
And the European has a plan to come here. The EU president came out and said, Africa is the jungle that we have to come and turn it into the garden.
Yep.
And they told him, 3 years. You guys got 3 years to prepare yourself. Otherwise, if you go past that 3 years and you haven't started to rebuild Africa in the way Africans want it, the Europeans going to come when this war is over, and they're going to put you in slavery in Africa. They're not going to let you come to Europe anymore. They're going to enslave you right here. They've been talking about it. I mean, shoot, we did videos on Blackbench Trust where people come out and said, Africa, we're going to turn Africa into these mega cities, and the Africans going to be working for us. So that's the kind of problem that we have in Africa now, and that these French, what essentially were French-dominated countries here in the Sahel, they are the younger generation, I'd say. There's a few older people in it also, but the younger generation are seeing what's happening, and they're stopping it. They say they're in the military. The military is the only people who can come in and throw out these politicians. There's nobody else. You can look at and see that as soon as this military reacts, you got ECOWAS military who wants to come in.
Not going to happen.
And they want to bring back the old men that used to be in there who were bowing down to the French president.
Yeah, then that's
not
not
only the
not
French president, but the EU. I saw a video I saw a picture. I got a picture on my phone. I was supposed to make a video about it. That the AU and ECOWAS sent these two men, leaders from Africa, to talk to the EU. And these two guys, the EU Secretary General was talking to them looking them in the face, and the two of them were looking down at the ground. And I said, look at this thing for me. I mean, they can't even look this guy in the face. They have no strength, not even the strength to look him in the face.
No courage.
They went to beg him for help for ECOWAS to fight against Niger.
Yeah. The thing here is that's not going to happen, though, because Nigeria, being the major player in terms of the ECOWAS military special operations, and then you take in Ghana, none of these people really want to fight on the ground. They really don't want to get into a fight with any of these Burkina Faso, Niger, or Mali. They don't want to get into a fight with them. And even if you did use a military, you risk being shot out of the sky with a surface-to-air missile by one of these soldiers on the ground. It's too much of a mess, and it will plunge ECOWAS into a lot of debt, because a military conflict requires a lot of resources, and they just don't have those disposable resources at hand. It's just not feasible for them. They're not going to get into a fight. And plus, the people on the ground have already spoken. You can't even deal with Boko Haram. How are you going to deal with Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso combined? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's kind of a fool's errand to try to go after.
Yeah, even Algeria has joined and say, look, we're not going to encourage you to go into Niger. And countries around Niger has refused to let France use their aerospace to attack Niger.
Yeah.
So things are changing. The average African is saying, no, we not want it. Just like you said, Mike, people in Ghana, when Kufuor said he wants to send troops, and there people in Ghana said, no, you're not. Those are our brothers, and we are not going to fight them.
And
Same
if he's
thing in Nigeria.
And if he's not too careful, he could be the next one being kicked out of office too. He could be taken out too. People are kind of dissatisfied with him. Not that he's a bad person, but he hasn't really been able to manifest a lot of the ideas that he's promoted. And so many African leaders have to understand that, you're on pins and needles right now. You're on thin ice if you don't play well with people on the ground, because whether they're trained by the United States or not, it doesn't really matter. People are going to get to the point where they decide that they're going to take up arms by the hundreds and take you out. And there's nothing you're going to be able to do about it, because if you try to stop those people from coming in, it's going to multiply. Because look at what happened in Niger when ECOWAS announced that they were going to have a military operation to, restore democracy there, or whatever the campaign they suggested. Look how many millions of people signed up, to join the military to defend Niger. Like that doesn't work anymore. Those strategies don't work. And so I don't know. I don't know how much time they have before they have to come to a resolution. I mean, ECOWAS. I don't know how much time they have before they have to come to a resolution that, this is not going to change anytime soon, and kicking them out of the AU or kicking them out of ECOWAS. I think that's, not necessarily, I don't think it's going to have a major impact. I think that when you start talking about bringing all these sort of sanctions and stuff, it only further exacerbates the problem, because now you're going to push Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso into the arms of North Korea, into the arms of Russia, into the arms of Belarus, into the arms of maybe even Turkey, for that matter, because Turkey, is rubbing, Erdogan is rubbing his hands, like giving them the Birdman hand rub and saying, oh, well, this is kind of advantageous right here.
Birdman hand rub.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. The Turks are all over this area.
Yep.
You hear what I'm telling you?
Mm-hmm.
They are building. They're not building large projects. They're building large projects in some areas, but they're all over here. All kind of, all the building materials that I'm seeing around here is coming from Turkey.
Yep.
See, one of the things that I like was the change that's happening. You dealt with that article with Mia Motley. She's one of the few people, and she's outside of Africa now, who's keeping African leaders focused on the things that they should be doing.
Yep.
Serious. Every time I see her meeting with one of these people, meeting in Africa somewhere, or South America, Central America, she's talking about what has to be done. And she's putting down, roots, saying, hey, let's start here today. Let's start tomorrow. Let's make a contract that we're going to start tomorrow. Let's start building, start doing this thing. Keeping these guys focused. Because otherwise I remember like about 6 months ago, she came out and made a speech. And then within a week, Macron is in Barbados now, talking about how he wants to join with her to build. And I'm saying to myself, I hope she don't fall for this.
No, she was at the Paris. She was at the Paris Climate, Accords, and so she was speaking out there about the Bridgetown Initiative, and then Macron said, this makes perfect sense. But Macron is saying it makes perfect sense because the French were screwed out of their gold reserves in 1971 under the Nixon administration.
Yep. And that's exactly, and they want to try to get back to that. But remember, France, that's the only thing that they have going for them is Africa. And now they're getting squeezed out. There's a whole realignment in the power ship. Mm-hmm. France is on their way out. And now they're sitting there saying, how do we deal ourselves back into this? That's the only thing they've got going on. That's the only, after Algeria and all that, that's the only thing they've really got going on. And that's that's their game. They're really trying to press it in there. And I thought Dr. Dr. Gerald Horne, he did a wonderful breakdown on this. I'm not going to get deep into that right now, but at the bottom line, they're saying France is basically Africa. Looking at France anciently, if you will, from how it's been dealing in Africa for the last 200-300 years, the French got to go. Wouldn't you agree, D. Raptor? They got to go.
Oh yes, even China is also pushing France out.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm not kidding you. After Macron, he messed with China, and China decided, you know what, before China was kind of passive, but now they're actively pushing France out. So that's how bad it is. China normally don't go active on you. When they do, something's wrong.
And squeezing France out of the Francophone states as it is going to have a huge impact on their economy. I mean, you can see the inflation going on inside France right now. Any further, pushing back or marginalizing of the French economy, you could potentially see a Soviet Union style collapse in France, where the state just collapses because they can't sustain themselves. At least not long term, they can't. Maybe they can go about 5 or 6 years, but that's what they said about when not Yeltsin, Gorbachev in 1986. They knew that this is going to come apart in the next 2, 3, 4 years, and eventually it collapsed in 1991. And so it's not unfathomable that France could suffer the same defeat. Despite what their military footprint is, they have a pretty substantial military, but it's kind of useless if you don't have the economy to really back it up. You have a lot of weapons and stuff. I mean, all the stuff that they're sending to the Ukraine is turning the Ukraine into a junkyard of European hardware and American hardware right now. It's not really helping them. I don't know what they're hoping to gain out of it. But if I was them, and I think that this is starting to happen now, used to have French Rafale jets landing on American aircraft carriers. I think that has come to a stop now.
Yeah. I mean,
Mike, here's what happened, right? If you don't have, before, America was the financier, not only America, but Saudi and a couple of other people who I will name were the financiers behind the French actions. Now that France has started, Macron has started kind of poking the eagle, and America is no longer financing him. He doesn't have this substantial amount of finances coming out. Africans, you got Burkina Faso, who's not putting their money in French banks anymore. French companies are not making money off of the resources anymore. Guess what's going to happen to the French economy? Just like you said, Mike. They don't have any money coming in. So but you're spending money, you don't have any money coming in.
Especially with the United Auto Workers, Stellantis, being, French. The French have a huge stake in that.
But
talk about it, Mike. Talk about it.
Oh, but this is the thing people have to look at too. Is the United States looking to undercut the French so the United States comes in there and tries to play a different or a heavier role, kind of almost like how we played, in Vietnam and these other areas. Is that possible?
They want to fight the Chinese, Nago. They want to fight the Chinese and the Russians in Africa. That's what this is about.
Africa, and that's why they may be coming in. That's the piece I was bringing up, because that's what Gerald Horne and some of these other people who are looking at this very closely are really are watching with real. They're watching this very closely and looking at America's moves and what we're getting ready to do there as well.
Yeah.
So this is being watched very closely. But what we're seeing is a shifting alignment, a different power dynamic going on in the African continent, and now you have African nations that are really starting to play a role in literally having some say in their freedom, if you will. This is a different game. It's different.
Don't forget. Go ahead. Yeah, don't forget that NATO just opened up their offices in Morocco.
Yeah.
or outside of Morocco. And I know that Africa-CARICOM has also put their offices in Morocco. So this is starting to turn into something a lot more kinetic than what we had anticipated before. I didn't think that they would be able to get a foothold in there because Gaddafi kind of kept them out for quite some time until he died. And now you're starting to recently see them pop up in West Africa. A lot of the Southern African development community is not really all that friendly to NATO and Africa really being there. And so I can't imagine that that's going to go down well with folks on the ground come next year. But tying this all back to African Americans, Black Americans for that matter, you got a new election coming up in 2024. This could be potentially, this potentially can determine what happens going forward for you too, because
very, very, very correct, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
This is going to play a significant role in what kind of resources you get. The attacks on affirmative action, DEI initiatives, this is all about squeezing you out of the conversation.
That's right.
And putting more focus on Africans, and then also squeezing Africans out of the conversation by squeezing out the French too.
That's right.
So, folks better pay attention that this is not something that's going to go down, in your best interest unless you show up at the ballot too, because you say what you want about Biden and Harris. I'd much rather work with them than to work with these jokers on the other side, because those jokers on the other side do not have our best interests. If you leave it up to them,
and they don't want you at, they don't want you at the table. Lord knows they don't want you at the table.
Not only are they going to go after affirmative action, not only are they going after AA contracts, with the SBA, and they're making sure that they take away any sort of opportunities from you. Black people get less than 1% of federal contracts and venture capital. And they want to take that from you too. So if they take the less than 1% that you do have, what are you going to have left to work with?
Yep. But you have these guys in the sphere here. They just don't really. They're not think at that level. But this is 3-dimensional chess here.
Yeah.
They're playing it. The dynamics are on the ground are moving in some very interesting ways. But I'm looking at these African countries right now realigning. There's a slightly different power dynamic that's happening right now that we hadn't really seen before.
Yeah.
So we have to watch this very closely, and the opportunities for us are great. They're great as well. And we have to play far stronger internationally than we're playing it now. Instead of sitting here and counting on everything to be done domestically, we have to have strong international influence as well. And that's something that, the smarter people here understand, but that's something that we have to consistently, push at all this, FBA and all that. Oh man, you guys gotta think a little broader than what you might be thinking currently. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. But anyway, D. Raptor, man, go ahead, break it down, bro.
Well, I just wanted to ask. I just wanted to add one additional thing here. A Hill, if there's questions or points that you would like to make with regards to the conversation.
No, we're getting ready to close out. We're getting close
out. Okay, I was just gonna let her know. The link is always pinned at the top if you ever want to join. Go ahead, you guys.
What I want to say is that one of the things that I'm happy to see happening is that when Lula came to power, when he came back to office, one of the things that immediately he put in on play is a focus on Africa, getting his connection to Africa. And one of the things that I would like to see is that not only CARICOM talking to Africa, but the friggin' 50 million people, I say 50 million, Black men and women in America talk to Africa. We used to have a big say in what goes on in Africa.
Well, you just had the Pan-African Congress.
I lost it. But we're losing it.
Yeah, we are.
We're losing. When you got a country like Barbados is getting more attention than you are. I'm not talking about when I say attention,
when Mia Mottley speaks, her words get pushed around the world. People pick it up, and you see it in all, even the South. I see it in Brazil. Bloggers in Brazil translate into Portuguese. So we have to have that same thing. The people from America doing the same. The Black people used to have that connection with us all over the planet, and we're not there anymore.
Yeah, because we've taken the wrong move when we can handle everything here in the United States, and we're not gonna go outside. We're gonna hunker down in here, and here we're looking at losing more by doing that. So our strategy is wrong, and we have to really push further outside. We have to go more internationally again. That's very important piece. You bring that up, very important. Our parochial strategy here is wrong. It's not going to work for us. So we're going to have to play it much more internationally. That's how we've basically gotten what we've gotten in so many ways, and we've lost sight of that because some of the wrong people have come up and started to really preach certain kind of things, and those voices need to be tamped down a lot more. We have to really talk more on the international side. But anyway, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring
Mike. Just one last thing. That link that I posted earlier, it's a photo. It's not anything you got to read. I just wanted to bring it up. There's a caption. That's all. Before we close out.
Okay. All right. Yeah. John Morant has joined the panel.
What?
His name was JM, so I thought it was John Morant.
No, that's funny as shit.
Oh no, it's just Jay from the
from
previous chats.
It was a joke. It was a joke.
What's going on, bro? Let me just read this real quick because you provided this link. This is HR 4548, Bridge to DRC Act, the Democratic Republic of Congo of 2023. This bill to require a national strategy to secure United States supply chains involving critical minerals sourced from Democratic Republic of Congo and for other purposes. And so United States recognized Democratic Republic of Congo, hereafter referred to as the DRC, on June 30th, 1960. The DRC has long suffered from armed conflicts, and essentially what Congress is looking to do is establish security parameters around these supply chain resources. This doesn't surprise me. Go ahead, DE.
Sorry, Mike. You remember that MOI that the president of Congo and the president of Zambia signed in Washington when they went to Washington, when all the African presidents went to Washington?
Yes.
Do you remember
was the
that?
U.S. Africa Summit. Yeah, the U.S. Africa Summit.
Exactly. That MOI, this is this thing coming up. You're seeing the results of that.
Yep.
And it's not that America is going to do anything. They're just making the law, making this ruling, and putting in a kind of like saying, hey, we just want to do this to show that we're interested in Congo.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot more they want to go after as well.
Section 3, paragraph 5 is quite interesting, actually.
Section 3, paragraph 5.
Yeah, but when you put something like that into the public, you're saying that, hey, we are here. You understand?
Yeah.
We are here. We are trying to control this area. We got control of this, especially when you speak in a country like the United States. That's how U.S. works.
The current near monopoly of People's Republic of China over the Democratic Republic of Congo's cobalt and critical mineral extraction and near monopsony of PRC over the DRC's cobalt and global critical mineral processing and refining deprives the DRC of important revenue and added value and represents an economic and national security threat for the United States that directly impacts United States energy independence and military preparedness. See, one of the things that people should understand about this, I'm glad you brought this up, Jay. The Chinese bought these mines from the Canadians, okay? The Canadians are mining experts. Make no mistakes about this. They're probably the most dominant mining experts on the planet, or at least within the United Nations. And so they've been able to build these sort of, robust mines for extracting resources, but they sold the contracts to the Chinese. And the Chinese are there only because the Canadians sold it to them. And so the United States is looking at this and saying, you dirty son of a bitch, you set us up. You sold those contracts to the Chinese where they, you didn't run that by us.
You didn't
right?
cut us in. You didn't cut us in.
Well, not so much as cut them in, because the United States looks at all of this. They see everything that goes on from a resource standpoint. They monitor all resources because they have to. That's just part of their framework. But I'm saying the Canadians sold these contracts to the Chinese, and that's how the Chinese got in there in the first place. But what people don't know, and it doesn't really make the news, is that there are a lot of Chinese miners actually being, well, I shouldn't say miners, but business people being assassinated over in Africa. That doesn't really make the news. Go ahead, Jay.
Is that, wait. Is that, I was just going to ask.
There's a famous case in Zambia.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, Jay, go ahead.
No, you can finish your thought.
I was just asking, Mike, is that because I've heard about that. Is that what that is related to?
Yeah, that's why the Chinese are setting up secret police stations. That's why the Chinese are setting up secret police stations all across these countries in Africa. They also have one.
Yeah, there was a young Nigerian brother, millionaire cat, and under dubious circumstances, bro. Kind of came up, deleted.
Yeah.
The Chinese are also thinking about putting bases. Right now they have one base, but they are also thinking about putting other bases in Africa just to combat the same thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jay.
One thing I find interesting, maybe you guys can provide some comments. These bills are always being pushed by Black representatives. It's just like the Countering Russian Malign Influence Act from Gregory Meeks. Yep. Very interesting. So I think we got to let our representatives know that this is not okay. So when you're voting, keep these things in mind.
Well, he's the leader on the House of Foreign Affairs Committee.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean,
but it's
sanctions on Zimbabwe, incredible.
Yeah, but he's not responsible for this one. This one is
No, it's not him. This is John James.
Yeah,
also Black.
Yeah, he's the conservative in the manosphere. For a lot of people who don't know, John James was being promoted as the the second coming of Christ, for Black men at one point. He lost the last election and during 2020, but this time around he got in, and so good luck to him. But to your point, Jay, they are using Black people to push these initiatives. Byron Donalds in Florida, they use these guys to push this stuff. Yep.
So Mike, just for clarity, right? And I want to ask Jay, just for clarity. So this is what Republicans are pushing, Black Republicans?
Yeah, he's a Black Republican. John James.
No, that's what I know. That's why I want it on the record. That's why I'm asking this question. You pushing this right here?
Yeah, that's him. Yep.
Oh shit. Okay.
He's also ex-military too. He's also ex-military. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we should keep in mind that there were Black conservatives in the 20s to the 70s supporting apartheid South Africa and Portuguese colonialism, like Max Yergin.
Interesting.
Yep. Louis Lomax.
Yep.
George Schuyler. I mean, this is nothing new.
Yeah, that's why
supporting apartheid.
Yeah, that's why I've always said on these panels that I don't trust Black conservatives. I don't trust these guys. They don't have the first of all, to be a Black conservative, it's a bit of an oxymoron.
You're a white supremacist.
You're an agent.
That's what you are.
Yeah, you're an agent. But I just want to say that when you talk about the left Black people are the left. Okay, they were the left. They were to the left of slavery. Okay, they were to the left of Jim Crow and apartheid. They were to the left of neoliberalism as well as capitalism as a whole. They were to the left of what do you call it? Institutional measures to stymie their growth. These were all things that made Black people, whole. And so when people say that, well, I'm not on the left, well, what does that really mean? Because Black people are the left.
Well, Mike, hold on. I just got to ask this question. I got to get it on the record. Make sure that we have this on the live stream.
Mm-hmm.
How come these bills aren't talked about by the conservatives in this space?
Say that one more time.
How come bills like this are not talked about by conservatives in this space?
Because they're cultural conservatives. So cultural conservatism doesn't include public policy, right? It doesn't really mean anything outside of public policy. But bills like this are considered to be conservative. They're basically upholding the status quo of white supremacy, like Jay was mentioning, that in the 70s you did have folks who supported apartheid South Africa.
They supported.
I was going to say. So let me ask you. So if let's say we have some conservatives up on this panel, right? Say Hood Service, for example, that guy, right?
But these are not conservatives. They're not.
Wait. I'm asking it for the general sort of, conservative, because okay, Mike, leftist gets thrown at this platform a lot, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but so I'm kind of mirroring the sentiment here, just for a second. I'm just mirroring it because I'm reading this and I'm like, well, would they actually stand for this?
I don't think they have a political bone in their body. Is what I'm saying. That when you talk about conservatism with some folks, they don't really have a political identity. They only have a cultural identity, which is conservatism. They romanticize the idea that Black people were living wholesome before 1965. When you look at history, through the literature, there's nothing representing anything like that. You got some people who hold up, E. Franklin Fraser's book, but that in the book, it tells you itself that folks wasn't living all that well. So I don't know where they romanticize these ideas from. It's kind of it's kind of delusional, but that's how they think. They're free to think like that, but
they're trying to align themselves with white men's grievances.
Yeah. But wait a minute,
these Negroes are crazy. But anyway, go ahead.
I'm kind of trying to relegate it back because see, I think this is a good moment where we're kind of contrasting things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Sort of like this sort of conservative, say, cultural imperative that's not intrinsically actually tied into policy, right?
Mm-hmm.
This right here would actually be policy that a Black conservative would support. Vis-a-vis, who was that again? What's his name? What's the brother's name?
John James.
Right. And so this is what I'm saying. See, so if we got down to the policy conversation that MOT used to push a couple of years ago, right? Do you think conservatives wholesale would support this? As black, the Black people, right? I mean, I get the conservatives also, but see, I'm talking about what's actually written in this. Would they support this?
Not necessarily. I don't know if a Michael Steele, or Colin Powell would support something like this, right? Your more 20th century conservatives. But I don't even want to put like Colin Powell and Michael Steele in the same bucket as like a John James or these they're not.
But Mike, those guys were not the Republicans / conservatives of today. Because Michael Steele is he's your most successful Republican chairman in the history of the Republican Party.
He reached the highest level of black male achievement within Republican confines. Yeah. Well, I don't want to say that because you could probably put Colin Powell in that category.
But Michael Steele did hold. He was president. He did stay at the head of the RNC. Okay, no other black man came with.
And I think he was the first black lieutenant governor of Maryland, right?
Of Maryland, yeah.
Yeah. So you do have some, some kind of credibility to be added to that. But but just to kind of close this out, what's going on right now with all these moving pieces in the continent, and Pan-Africanism between Africa and CARICOM, and we have to kind of understand that where are we in all of this, right? In America, right? In Black America, where are Black people in all of this? And so we better start thinking now, like the clock is ticking. You got an election cycle coming in 2024. The peeling back and the rowing back of public policy that actually help Black people advance themselves is being, is being taken away from you. And so what is your next pivot? What is your plan B? Exactly. And I don't really hear that being a conversation in the manosphere amongst Black men as to what plan B is. It's not about bricks to the face of women. It's not about, people showing up, people showing up at porn conventions and stuff like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what are you going to do from a global perspective? How are you going to interact with these folks, and what is going to be the outcome of all of this? You're not
going to hear that from the mentation of the people here. You're not going to hear that from them. We will talk about that on the Brain Trust, but you will not hear that from the rest of these other Negroes who have no interest or no understanding of how this stuff works, except, like a brick to the face or some other chick or some other bullshit that these guys will be sitting on and talking about how they want to kiss Trump's ass. That's about it. That's all you got.
So, look, to close this out, man, I wanted to kind of circle this back to something that DE had mentioned about what was going on, say, like the turn of the 20th century. That photo that you guys see right there, and there's a quick little caption there, Mike, if you see it, that is the international students of Tuskegee, class of 1908. Okay, they were from all over, right? South America, Central America, Africa, Japan, everywhere.
Europe, yep.
That's what was going on, right? But I wanted to bring that up to support a point that DE had made earlier. So for those of you guys who catch the playback and what have you, just so you know that this is what this is a reference to right here. But this also supports the work that Rael has did with the Booker T series, right? The impact of Tuskegee and Booker T. Washington. So that's just visual proof for you guys.
Yeah, Tuskegee was one of the leading voices in this whole African Center movement.
Okay, D, I didn't know you were still here, bro. Go ahead and close it out, bro.
Well, I'm hoping that Mike brought up the subject of reparations and touched on it lightly, but one of the things I'd like to see is that the group in America that's seeking reparations, the one in London, France, and Germany, Europe, joined together with the Caribbean, Brazil, South America, Central America, and Africa. Because
that just happened, DE.
If you go at these people one-on-one, you're going to get kicked.
Yeah, that just happened, DE. That happened in July.
Okay.
Yeah, that was in DC. Mia Motley spoke. I believe Jamaican ambassador spoke there. Many members of the Caribbean community had came and spoke in Washington DC at that event. So that did happen a few months ago, and so we know that that's starting to go down now. But you do have these acronym folks, who want to take advantage of that conversation for themselves and kind of squeeze everybody else out. But that's the extent of the geopolitics of Black America at the very least. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button on the way out, share the video if possible, and hit